Hello and welcome to Hanratty on Karate. So I usually run an instructor's course for would-be instructors, and most of it is based on my book, Shotokan Karate Handbook. But I do get a lot of questions that are really outside of the box, and I'm always willing to have a look at these because if I don't know it, then it increases my base of knowledge, and so I'm really happy and somebody takes the time to question what I'm teaching and, offer something else if they've got it, or just make an inquiry that, they know I'll look at and maybe do a little bit of research on, which I love doing. I mean, I'm almost 80, but I love learning. I'll learn all the time. Probably read a couple of books a week, different kinds. So something that I enjoy doing. Anyway, a couple of years ago, one of the young instructors in the instructor's class asked me exactly how long the Japanese had samurai and how long they had emperors and, where they came from and all that. So I decided to do a little bit of research. Now, at one time, probably about, 30,000 years ago, the Japan archipelago, which is that whole string of islands from the Kuril Islands all the way down to the Ryukyu Islands, Okinawa and stuff, was attached to the mainland. It was attached to the Korean Peninsula in the south and as far up as the Siberian mainland in the north. And in the middle was this Great Lake, which is now the Sea of Japan. So about 10,000 years ago, rising sea levels, probably due to the end of the Ice Age, separated the Japanese archipelago from continental China, or Asia, if you like. And when you look at the anthropology of the Japanese race, they're probably about 85% Neo-Mongoloid and 15% Proto-Mongoloid. Now, this is a pretty old race classification system, but basically what it tells you is that the origins were in Mongolia. And if you look at race classification, if you're really into anthropology, it's quite interesting, but I don't think people really want to go into that kind of thing before. As I said, it's quite old-fashioned, and everybody is just a human on the planet as far as I'm concerned. So when you look at Japanese history, Japanese say that their emperor goes back to the 6th century BC. Now, most of that is mythical, and it may be wishful thinking on the part of the Japanese, but basically modern historians and archaeological digs don't support that. Japan wasn't really considered a full country, or if you like, a full nation, until about the 3rd century, 4th century AD. Prior to that, it was just distinctive settlements, just like villages in England and all over the place, and where we get all our own names from. Now, if you go through Japanese, there's two types of history with Japan, and we get most of what we know about Japanese history from two books. Now, collectively, these two books are known as Kiki, K-I-K-I. But the first one was called Kojiki, and the second one was called the Nihon Shoki. So they're complementary, but they're different in context, okay? So both were commissioned by Emperor Tenmu. So the Kojiki is probably 65-70% mythical. And basically it was commissioned by the emperor, along with all of his family and a couple of other outsiders, to establish the authenticity of the emperor and basically to tell everybody that he was descended from the goddess Amaterasu and Kanjini, who was the god. So therefore he was divine, which is really an outdated concept as well. And even the emperor gave that up a few years ago. But that was basically what that book was for. Now, the Nihon Shoki was another historical book commissioned by the same Emperor Tenmu, but this was more official and was a lot more authentic, and it was made for a different purpose. The first one was to establish the emperor as a divinity to the Japanese people, And the second one served to legitimize Japan as a sovereign country and an independent nation to the rest of the world, and, was going to be sent to China and Korea and all the rest of these people. So when you look back at it, the line of Japanese emperors, the first to recognize the lineage of the emperors was China. And most of what you've got, written history, or at least recorded history, is from the Chinese. The Japanese didn't really start to put things into writing, and even then they used Chinese characters and the Chinese language to put down what they wanted to put down. They didn't start that until, 3rd or 4th century. So when you look at the Chinese, the first record we have of Japan, and in that instance they called it the country of Wa. W-A, Wa. And they gave the directions how to get there, mostly for their ambassadors or their trading people. And the first person that they recognized as being a leader in the country of Wa was a woman. Now, she was probably a shaman of some sort, but she ruled over quite a large area in what was later known as Yamato, where the original emperor was supposed to have come from. So her name was Himiko, and she was sent a golden seal from the Chinese government, and this is in the records of Wei. So it'd be the Wei dynasty, and it's all written down. And she was supposed to have united the ancient Japanese. So this is from the Jomon to the Yayoi period. Okay, so what do those periods mean? Well, Jomon was named after the pottery they used, which had like rope markings on it. Jomon means rope. And then you had the Yayoi period where rice cultivation came in and things started to settle down, and people started to congregate in groups and villages and communities. Because growing rice, of course, is a communal occupation. You need more than one person. Everybody has to work together to get the rice harvest in. So wet rice harvesting began in about the Yayoi period. It was generally acknowledged by the Chinese that the shaman queen, if she was a shaman, Himiku, whatever you call it, that she got all of the people together and she was looked upon as a ruler. Or she united them, okay? So that went on from there. So if we jump ahead a little bit, because I think the question I was asked was, was there always samurai in Japan, and were they any older than, say, knights in Europe, or these kind of warriors that are pretty much spread through every civilization. They all have their own warriors. We had the centurions in Rome, and most of these civilizations are known by either their warriors or their martial cultures. So not really. The samurai only came into being in the Heian period after one of the emperors had introduced a code that was basically copied from the Chinese code. It was called the Taiho Code, and after that it was changed to the Yoro Code. So what it did was it put people into different classes and told them laws of how to run the government, and basically put them into provinces and who would run them, who the governors were, and what they were allowed to do. So these provinces were called kuni originally. Now in Japan, I believe they're called prefectures, which is a French word. Same thing. They all mean the same thing, like counties in England and areas and municipalities, basically. So if you look at the Taiho and the Euro Code, they're basically about the same thing. And they lasted from, about middle of the 8th century or beginning of the 8th century, 700 AD, until the Tokugawa period in about midway through the 13th century, which is when we see about the 11th century, all of these kunis, or districts, if you like, provinces, whatever you want to call them, all were given names, they were given governors, and the governors brought up retainers, and these retainers were eventually built up into samurai armies or guards, if you like. And, of course, there was always a little bit of upheaval regarding who ran what province and stuff like this. Now, the emperor was pretty much untouchable, as he'd already wrote a book telling everybody how he was divine. And the emperor's line, you could not just be an emperor. It had to be a hereditary title passed down. So what they'd do is they'd try to marry off their daughters or their sons into the line and then take it from there. So there was always a lot going on, a lot of conflict. And we know from history, and, if you look at some modern productions like Shogun and stuff like that, which is quite good, very entertaining, they're not always factually correct, but they're somewhat. Then that's the way they moved on. That's just a really very, very brief look at what went on in ancient Japan. It wasn't any different than any other struggling prehistoric civilization. When Japan separated from the mainland, you were basically in the Neolithic period when they were using stone tools, probably in the Neolithic where they were, basically polishing the tools and getting to use them. And then groups were hunter-gatherers. Eventually, rice cultivation crossed over from the mainland and they started to settle down. You started to settle down into basically agricultural groups. And as the groups got larger, then you expanded and larger groups tended to unify. They got together and they formed, they were recognized as a country by the Chinese, as say in the Wei dynasty. But this was only because they were a large group and they probably sent emissaries over to China who they admired so much. And in fact, their writing is Chinese. The kanji is Chinese, actually. Katakana, that's later on, was often referred to as the woman's type of writing, but is probably more Japanese than the kanji. But as I've mentioned before in previous podcasts, that Japanese are great imitators, and they'll often imitate to the point of perfection, way past, and modify whatever it is they imitate way past the original concept and improve and perfect it till they're happy with it. Okay, so just a little chat on this. I've been researching this for quite a bit of time now, and I dropped off it and then went back and dropped off it. But I'm finding it quite fascinating, so I'll probably do a lot more depth on it and get into it. But if you have any questions and if anybody thinks this is a worthwhile subject to follow, then I'm quite happy to do it. It's just like any other kind of history or prehistory, if you like, or ancient history, whatever you want to call it. We can go a little bit later on up into the Heian period where we see the emerging of samurai and retainers and stuff like that. And of course the warlike periods that we have after that, different incidents that sparked off these things. We'll certainly go into that. And the different names that come up, if I can pronounce them, they're all interesting. Learning about history is always interesting. Hopefully it serves as a lesson for the present. Not really, when you look at the world right now. Obviously we didn't learn our lessons from the last 80 years, but maybe we will. Anyway, okay, have a great day and let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you later.